We have got time for questions. I haven't seen any appear in the chat so far, but would anybody like to switch on their microphone and ask a question at all? It's quiet at the moment.
Hi, I wouldn't mind asking a question. Can you hear me okay?
Sure, yeah, please do.
Yeah, it was really interesting talks. Thanks very much. It's not my field, but as a hydrologist, I was really interested in the results that Liz presented that showed that water came out as one of the favourite sounds. And in one of the studies, I think it was a bar chart. And so that's a bit interesting to me as a hydrologist, but I was wondering whether there's much research into the difference between hearing those sounds in an outdoor setting versus the indoor setting, for example, the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and I'm not sure to what extent that's been done. It might have been, but I think the study was about water in sort of outdoor spaces. But I think, given the sort of the kind of, the fact that water seems to be quite high in terms of people, enjoying the sounds of water, and I guess there's kind of a lot of nuance there, isn't there, potentially, because there might be a sound of a kind of raging torrent that's not quite as relaxing as a trickling stream, but water does seem to be part of the kind of sensory, both hearing it and seeing it, in terms of kind of impacts on kind of psychological and physiological well-being. And studies have shown with vegetation indoors that can have an impact on people in a good way. So I think maybe also the kind of sounds of water indoors is not quite the same, but it's if you can't get outdoors, then I think that could be quite important.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you, Nadine. Any other questions from? We've got a couple of questions in the chat. One was to share the slides. There will be a recording available after this anyway, and I think so that is an opportunity to go back and revisit all of this at your leisure, which I shall certainly be doing too. We've got Alessio who's appeared. Did that mean you wanted to ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was. If I may, I would invite Alice to elaborate a bit more on the three paradigms theories that she just introduced to us. And I was wondering whether she was also seeing some complementarity across what Benny Crows and Almo Farina and your own work are offering today.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Almo Farina is absolutely understands the ecosystem as a complex system. He developed what's called the acoustic complexity index, although slightly confusingly, it's not really a measure of complexity in the way that anyone else measures complexity. It's more a kind of, musicians would think of it as a kind of spectral flux, perhaps. But absolutely, he's done other work at looking at like fractal dimensionality as a possible way. So yeah, he absolutely sees that's his sort of conceptual frame, if you like. But he then happens to also develop this semiotic angle. He's a landscape ecologist originally, so he thinks in these really large scales. So I think they're absolutely commensurate. They're not different. I think as I was trying to point to, I think it's for me though, that semiotic perspective hasn't been developed. The implications for that haven't necessarily been developed in our measurement methods, but of course the semiosis also underpins the acoustic needs hypothesis, right? Because it's about communication, and so the kind of motivation behind that is the basic motivation is that organisms need to hear each other in order to communicate. Now, I'm not an ornithologist, and I'm not experienced enough and knowledgeable enough in evolutionary theory to understand deeply the issues or to articulate to you the problems with that hypothesis. But we do see, what we see basically is that it's a bit more complex than that, complicated than that. I'll resist using the word in multiple places. So the acoustic news hypothesis is basically it doesn't always hold up. So I don't think but at the same time, diversity is a key component in complexity, right? You can't really have a complex system made of one part, well, you can't, or even 2 parts or 3 parts, right? So it's not that they contradict each other. I think they're different perspectives or different frames to approach how you conceptualize an ecosystem and a soundscape. And it's just that our existing approaches have kind of put all our eggs in the acoustic diversity basket, if you like, and really just focused on diversity as a proxy for acoustic diversity as a proxy for biodiversity. And it seems actually that theoretically and empirically that it just isn't that simple. And obviously measuring any complex system is never going to be simple. So it's so noisy, and for me that's one of the things that, although this earlier what we've done is really speculative, we're just finishing off the publication, but the fact that we even see any kind of attractors, those face portraits, with any clarity, given how noisy a signal, any ecological data is, and especially an audio signal, to me it feels like it's a kind of interesting different perspective. So it's not like an argument or debate where I'm right therefore you're wrong. Do you see what I mean? It's like, how are they complementary? Maybe that's what your question is asking. So it's just different ways of approaching the problem, if you like. I don't know if that answers your question.
Very well, thank you very much.
I've got a question from Gamzi. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Yes, hi. I wanted to ask about something that I'm in Middle East Technical University, so our campus is a very wide range of landscape. It has varieties of ecosystems in it, and there are some areas that our ministry decided to just plant pine cones everywhere, and the diversity decreased so widely. So I am a graduate from biology, and right now I'm trying to do my master's degree in cognitive biology. So I'm thinking that I can compare those landscapes, the wider biodiversity areas and those with covered in pines. What kind of techniques and tools can you suggest me?
That's a
Oh,
very
just
good,
some-
very
just a
good
direction.
question. Sorry if you-
Carry on, please.
So it depends what sort of angle you're interested in. I guess I come from an environmental sociology background, so then it would be about the sort of the landscape and potential some of the health and well-being benefits that might be sort of multi-sensory and include kind of soundscapes. So that could be one way to kind of think about it, and whether that has an impact on students and staff, both when they're outside, but also whether they're more productive. So there is some evidence around looking out at green space, for example, and having indoor kind of vegetation that's quite calming and has kind of impacts on things like productivity. So that might be one way to look at it. And then I guess Anna might have very different ways of thinking about it as well. Alice, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think I'll leave it with Liz. I think that's a really good response. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've got a question from Viviane Roche, who says, do you know Carlos Ravel's book, Order of Time, might be useful? And my own last book attempts to respond allegorically, semiotically to our loss of biodiversity. And congratulations on both your projects. I don't know whether those books are...
I don't know the Order of Time, but I've heard of it, so I will kind of check it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment, and similarly we'll have a look.
Any more questions from? I did have one that's, I think, more directed to Liz, about, because you mentioned the sort of culturally different sort of listening experiences. I wonder whether that has a relationship to kind of geographical differences and the kinds of forest flora. Does that have any bearing on the kind of experiences that you kind of picked up from different geographical regions or different places?
I mean, we haven't kind of studied it explicitly, but I think there are differences in people's expectations depending on where they are geographically. So, you know, we often do kind of quite a bit of work about who's visiting what forests, for example, and why do people go to different forests at different times, you know, and there's a whole kind of range of reasons about that. But I guess, you know, an expectation of what you might hear in a sort of, you know, an upland forest in Scotland would be very different from a community forest in a sort of very urban landscape. And you know, sometimes then the expectation kind of means that people are happy with what they're experiencing, because, you know, people, even in some of the peri-urban work that I did, were talking about, you know, just being slightly away from the traffic with the trees and other vegetation in the way, you know, just kind of help them to feel that they were separated, both visually and in terms of sound and kind of mentally as well. So there's a kind of a range of things kind of going on there. And the kind of cultural differences. I mean, I remember one of the network members talking about, you know, there's kind of, you know, work to kind of reduce background level of sound, because noise can be quite impactful on people's health in a negative way. So how can you kind of reduce background noise? But then you get other complications arising, because then people might hear something that they haven't heard before because of this other noise going on, you know, like neighbours shouting at each other or something like that. So there's quite a bit kind of you know, as Alice says, lots of complexity going on in some of these things. But I think, you know, expectations and what you kind of, why you're going out there in the first place. There's something called attention restoration theory that talks about, you know, being away from the thing that's where your directed attention is making you quite kind of stressed and fatigued, and being away in a forest or some other nature space. And the kind of they talk about extent, which is more about, you know, does the environment meet your expectations? And that'll be different depending on whether you've stepped out 5 minutes from the office or travelled for 3 hours to get somewhere more remote.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's nice to flag those cultural differences as well. I had a PhD student a few years ago who we were supposed to be doing science work in the Amazon, but we also did some kind of basic anthropological work. And she's Ecuadorian, and she was really interested in this idea that, you know, soundscapes make us feel happy and calm. And it's like, well, yeah, all the work has been done in Western cities, right? So you go to the Green Park and you feel calmer. But what about, are there differences? If you live in the forest all the time, then is that so? You know, and isn't it quite exciting then? So where we were in the Warani territories in the Amazon at the time, and actually the sound of a motor was like really exciting, because they'd only had motors on the boats for a few years, and it meant that their brother was coming back from the road, and he probably had a present for them, you know. So I put a link in the chat. She did some quite nice, very simple work around emotional relationships. So coming back to the expectation, you know, our associations with sound is what is, yeah, arguably what underpins our sort of physiological response as well, isn't it? Our history, our kind of lived history of those interactions. And she showed, I don't know if I can just screenshot and chuck it in the key figure in the chat, but she just asked people to list you know, a bunch of sounds that made them feel happy, sad, tranquil, fearful, or irritated. And she did that in these forest societies, so in Warani communities, in students from cities, and also people who lived in sort of border towns. And she found, yeah, not surprisingly, I put it in the chat, some for forest communities, what we would call natural sounds under someone like Schaefer's schematics of what a natural sounds, actually the full range of emotions were listed by natural sounds, because there might be a puma, or there might be a snake, or there might be, you know, for them the oil plantation was irritating, you know, or it might be sadness because they hear their ancestors, you know, who are dying, or this kind of. So it was quite interesting, quite simple exploration of just like these assumptions of what emotions are, you know, depends obviously on our everyday lives and what sounds we hear every day.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks. I think we're going to have to stop on time because I believe one of our speakers at least has to go at 5:30. Anna, you had your hand up.
Oh yeah, just a quick one, I guess. And there is also a comment, right, by Xavier.
Yes. Just to say thank you very much. Graduated from a master's degree in neurosciences, applied to sensory analysis after having worked 1 year in psychoacoustics. Thinking about reinversion in acoustic, and you definitely convinced me.
Okay, great. It's a bit speculative, so don't blame me if it goes wrong.
So, quick question, I guess, for the time being. Do you have, both of you work with soundscapes, with different approaches, but do you have any like recommendations for raising awareness among the general public on issues such as climate change through this use of soundscapes? Any recommendations you'd like to share?
I mean, I guess, you know, we talked about this a bit in the Ecotones network about one was about how you can connect people to nature. So, you know, as Alice mentioned, there has been a sort of disconnection. We've become very urbanized. So how you might use sound to kind of, you know, reconnect people. But then also, you know, you can incorporate within that things about why, you know, why there might be certain sounds or lack of sounds in a particular place that could link to, you know, some of the biodiversity crises or environmental crises. So, you know, this is what a degraded landscape, you know, sounds like, and you could do experiments around that, you know, but you could also take people out into different environments or get them to kind of design something where they go out and test themselves. They go to different places and they listen, and then they come back and kind of talk about, you know, what those differences are and why they might have heard some things in some places, not in others. That might be about change in habitat, but might also be about, you know, why some habitats are being restored or degraded, for example.
Yeah, and I would offer it's just simply encourage anything you can do to encourage people to listen as well. Really helps people in the simplest way, whether that's, like Liz said, you're doing some wonderful school stuff. I've done only very simple stuff, but as soon as you get, you know, the simplest thing, giving some headphones and a microphone and turning it up a bit and just getting them to be quiet, and even then they realize how loud they are, you know. And it's a great metaphor, kind of allegory for how loud humans are and how we take up so much space, you know. And actually, as soon as you turn up the gain on a microphone, they have to be quiet and listen to other species. I found that with school children, they respond really, really quickly to that simple invitation. And again, with the Wilding Radio thing, we made that initially just as our own interest, like, can we hear the changes from this beavery reintroduction? But it's had a phenomenal public response of you know, unsolicited feedback from people just saying, I couldn't, you know, I haven't been able to sleep for 3 years and now I can sleep. And Liz, I find it really interesting that you had said the mix of water and birdsong, because you can mix between hydrophones and air microphones. And yeah, especially people living in cities saying how valuable they found it. So it's almost like during lockdown, like people don't need that much. They just need an excuse to listen somehow. And it seems to be to pull them along that pathway. Let's hope anyway.
Thank you.
A great note on which to end. So thank you very much. So yes, thank you very much. We are 4:30 on the dot, so we've done quite well to finish perfectly on time. Thank you so much to our speakers, Liz and Alice. Thank you, as always, to Anna for organising all of this. It's been,
and thank you to Pete
really
as well
fantastic.
for, you know, co-hosting.
No problem.
And
Yes.
all the speakers.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will close there. Thank you to everyone for coming. It's great to have such a wide audience, because we've had a good number of people subscribe to this, so we're very grateful. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really inspiring and good luck with the project. I'm sure we'll be in touch again. I know it's just Pete, nice to meet you, and you, Liz. Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you very
Alice.
much.
Yeah. Bye.
Alice, please, thank you so much. And Pete.